Hey, Monica. Thank you for having me on your podcast today, and for giving me the opportunity to introduce myself. I am Kimberly Stratman, retired police lieutenant from the Dallas Police Department. I had the career of law enforcement for just a little over 30 years. My husband is an active SWAT officer for Dallas still, and we live outside of Dallas in a small town, and I have two grown boys, and I spend my time now taking care of our one remaining dog. And I am a life coach for high performing women and a retirement life coach for first responders. So I stay pretty busy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool that you took your experience from law enforcement in your 30-year career and also your leadership there to move into retirement yourself and then also help others to move into retirement. So I think that's super cool. So I came up with 5 questions for you today, just kind of spitballing here, but I thought would be cool for people to know and maybe hear from your perspective what law enforcement looks like, having your 30-year career and also being a female of rank, which I think is super cool because I think it's hard finding many women of rank within law enforcement today. So let's start with maybe one of the biggest struggles you had during your 30-year career.
Well, I'll be honest on this. I think I kind of, on one hand, did a great disservice to myself during my career because I didn't always recognize what was a struggle or what was an obstacle. So I say that was a disservice because I didn't maybe always handle things the best way, or I maybe didn't learn things the first time. But on the other hand, I think it worked out really well because it never really stopped me. I never really said, oh, there's something in my way. What am I going to do? I just kept going forward. But what I think, if other people were looking in, they would say that the biggest problem that our obstacle I had is I wasn't going to promote higher than the rank of lieutenant because I wasn't willing to take the time away from my children. As a divorced mother, I needed to be very careful and really protect my time I had with my kids. And that meant not going away to the amazing, awesome 2, 3, 4 week schools that the different agencies and organizations put on. That was kind of the biggest thing for me, I think, is having to either consciously or unconsciously realize that I wasn't going to promote higher than lieutenant because I was putting my kids first. And I will tell you that I do not regret it. I don't regret that at all. And I did have, there were a couple chiefs that, just were very blatant about it. Like, well, if you're not willing to do this, you're never going to promote, you're getting in the way of your career. And it was a no-brainer for me. It was just, I had 2 little boys. Of course, I was going to pick them first. I think that happens to a lot of people. So it is not just me that it happens to, but I think it really happens to women. I think it really happens to women. So that
Yeah,
answer your question?
yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So I mean, was that like, did you feel guilty during that time maybe of making that decision of versus kids versus career? Do you think there was a lot of pressure from your work that was guilting you into putting your career first versus your family?
I really want to go on record and say that I worked for some very good chiefs. The way our department was set up is as a lieutenant, you reported directly to a 1-star chief. And then, the 1-star reported up from that. And so as a lieutenant, back before Dallas had the rank of major, the lieutenant kind of did everything. And I worked for chiefs that allowed me to give 1,000% when I was at work. And they trusted me, and they knew that if I'm at work, I'm going to give 1,000%. And if I'm at home, I'm going to answer the phone, and I'm going to answer at the time, the text messages, the pagers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer that. Back in the day. And go to meetings, even outside of my shift time, go to meetings if it didn't interfere with my children. And so when I told them I couldn't do something because of the kids, I didn't get any pressure and I didn't get any pushback from the majority of them because they knew that I gave 1,000% to them. And I didn't drop overtime cards. Like if I got a phone call, I didn't drop an overtime card for that. I did my job. I took care of things. And the times that I did feel the pressure was I was nominated to go. So here in Dallas, we have a couple of organizations that do some local training, really good training. And it's very affordable for Dallas to send us there because we don't have to stay in a hotel. We just drive there from the Metroplex. But I wouldn't be able to take my kids to school in the morning, and I worked nights. So I took my kids to school in the morning and I picked them up in the afternoon. And if I went to this school, I couldn't have done it. And I made the comment, oh, I can't do that. I take my kids to school in the morning. And the chief was flabbergasted. He's like, well, get someone else to take your kids to school for 2 weeks. I'm like, not doing it. Not doing it. And on one hand, I appreciate the fact that the opportunity was offered. And I appreciate the fact that the chief pointed out to me, you're not going to go anywhere if you don't, make your decisions differently. I didn't get mad about it. I wasn't offended by it. It was like, if you tell me the rules, I know how I'm going to play. If you tell me the guidelines and the requirements, I'll let you know if I'm in. That's better than, not letting me know what's going on. And then I'm shocked if it doesn't happen.
Right. That's awesome. It sounds like your environment that you worked in was very respectable in the sense that you were able to, I guess, give what you could give and also control what you control, but also set that boundary of like, my kids are my boundary. If it affects my kids, I'm not going to do the thing or go to the training or whatever. And I think at the end of the day, that probably preserved you and it preserved your mental health and it preserved your family time, which I know a lot of women struggle with finding that boundary or that line of how much do I work, how much do I give to my family, and how much do I do for myself. So it sounds like you did a really good job of managing those two, and also like earning the respect of your superiors at the time too, of being like, no, like I'm here to give you my 100%, but here's my boundary, and I'm going to stick with that.
It's, it was easy at the time because I'll be honest, going through divorce and dealing with stuff like that, that was the hard part of my life. That was the hard thing. And since the boys were the most important thing to me, all my decisions were based on that. Now, I also want to really make this point, and that is, once I had my children to their dad, or once I had my children to school, or once I had my children to Boy Scouts, wherever they were going, and I was at work, my mind was at work. And I recognized that I needed to do that. When I said I gave 1,000% to work, I gave 1,000% to work. I made sure that my kids were someplace safe, and then I could take care of all of my responsibilities. And like I said, I served chiefs that took care of me, that allowed me to do my job. And so I did my job, and I worked with officers that knew that I was giving them 100% and I expected 100% from them. And it worked very well. And so I guess would refer to that as compartmentalizing your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to do that. I was able to do that.
Very cool. Definitely a tough time, I can tell. And maybe we'll get into that at a later time. But let's switch gears to something a little bit more lighthearted. How about talking about a time where you felt most accomplished or fulfilled within your career? If you can think of one or a couple, maybe.
I have an example, and I was actually thinking about just the other day, and it's not very light or easy, but let me just tell it to you. So this was back probably about 12 years ago, and not everybody on the department had tasers at that time. And I was working deep night, and I was working a part of town that we were very, very, very busy. We were very busy all the time, very short staffed. And even though I was a lieutenant, I was out answering calls, I was covering my guys, and we were busy, and it was wonderful. I mean, if you're going to be at work, you might as well be working, right? I
Yeah.
mean, but yeah, it's a part of town that definitely needed people to serve them and take care of them and help them. And a call came out of a man being aggressive in his underwear. Now, this is the middle of the night. It's a shopping center that's closed. Shopping center's closed. And I get there almost right after my first couple officers get there, and they're very young officers, very good men, but very young. And we get there, and there's this huge man in his underwear, moving around very oddly, right? Very oddly. You can tell he wasn't with it. Now, this is a part of town that we did answer a lot of calls with people on drugs. And we would get hurt dealing with them because the strength, the superhuman strength that would be they would have, and it took a lot of officers, and then we needed the paramedics because then they would die. I mean, it was just, because of the drugs in their system, excited delirium and stuff like that. Yeah, and so kind of that's what we thought we had in the situation. So we get a bunch of officers there, the paramedics are there, and one of the guys is like, I think I'm going to tase him. And I just said, let's really think about that. I said, we've got control of the scene. He's not going to hurt himself. He can't run into traffic. There's nobody else around. It's just us. Let's see what we have. And the officers are like, okay, now let's be fair to them. We are responsible for keeping the citizens safe. And if this individual had run out into the street or done something, we're responsible for him. Right. But anyway, he ends up going up towards a building, up towards the shopping center windows. It's a strip shopping center. And the windows are mirrored. Security nightmare, right? But they're mirrored. Yeah. But this individual can see himself in the mirror, and he starts looking at himself. And I could tell all at the same time, we all realized that this is a boy. This is not a grown man in his underwear. This is a boy. It's a very large boy, but it's a boy. And he sees himself in the reflection, and he starts moving and watching himself. And my officers are able to go up and just gently put their hands on him, put the handcuffs on him, and the paramedics quickly get him onto a gurney. And I remember the looks on my officers' faces. They were just like, what was that? What happened? And one of the guys came up to me and said, what do you think it was? I said, well, I think we're going to find out that he's autistic. And I'll be darned, exactly at that moment, the dispatcher comes on the air and said, hey, there's a grandmother. She's reporting her 13-year-old grandchild has escaped the house. He's severely autistic. And the officers were like, oh my gosh, we would have tased him. He's a kid and he needed his help or whatever. I said, no, you thought about it. You figured this out on your own. So I wrote a commendation for them. And I explained in depth the call and their decision-making and how this individual was safe. He was taken to the hospital. He got whatever he needed. We got social services involved again for the family. But I wrote the commendation for him, all these officers. And then the chief that I was working for, he comes to me, calls me in the office. And he said, you're not on this commendation. And you were there. You need to be on this commendation. He goes, I hold you 100% responsible for what your officers do in the field. And your officers did the right thing, and they do the right thing repeatedly. And I said, no, this is them. They did this. This is them. They get the credit. But he actually added me to that commendation. And that really, gosh, I'm getting emotional. But that really made the point to me that we matter. Look at me. You're laughing at me.
I'm smiling because this is so cool. I love it. I really do.
This just made the point to me that it matters. It matters if you expect your officers to do the right thing. Don't expect these men and these women especially, but at the time, this whole group I had was men. Right. But don't expect them to be tough and tumble. And, when I trained, you had to take control. You had to have hands on first. You had to do this first. Blah, 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 blah. And it's a little different now. It's still appropriate to get hands on first. Many times it's still very appropriate. But there are other times you can step back. And you've heard me say before, widen the gap. widen the gap of when you have to make the decision and when you have to take action. You know, take it when you have to, do what you have to do. But in this one situation, we were able to slow down. And it was such a learning experience for all of us, because most of these young officers, you know, right out of college, right out of the military, they'd never dealt with an individual in this situation before. And so it was a neat experience. And then it was also nice to work for a chief that clearly pointed out, you know, you get what you give and you get what you expect. And so that was nice. It was very, very fulfilling. And well, all these years later, it's, you know, what I think about. So
No, that's so cool. I thank you for sharing that. I'm definitely not laughing at you. I'm smiling because I think it's so cool to me. Plus, I have such a heart for like mental health and mental illness, and those were the calls that I always enjoyed working and I always thought was
yeah.
fulfilling because those are the people who are dealing with like mental crisis, like they can't advocate for themselves at that point. So I always had a heart for those people. I always tried to help those people. So I think that's super cool. And I've actually signed up for an autism class this month that I'm going to. That's on autism spectrum. So that's timely. Very cool. I love that. That was awesome that you were able to not only learn then yourself what was going on, but also like walk your guys through the process of, because that's tough even today. And I've had this conversation with my fiance of like he always wants to get up and like slap some handcuffs on and call it good. And I'm like, you realize as a female, like I can't do that. Like I would love to be able to do that, but my size often is so much smaller than the people that I'm dealing with that I'm doing this talking and dancing circle around the room sometimes with these people that if you push me and we go hands on, it's going to happen, but I'm going to dance around until I can get somebody else there until we can and make it safer than me just trying to go hands on with somebody when the fight is already unequal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So cool. I love that. That was such a cool story. Thank you. All right. So talking about some of those things, maybe getting a little emotional. I mean, what were some things that you did during your career that helped you to manage your stress or maybe helped you work through some of the not so happy calls or maybe just some stressful times you went through? What were some good methods or coping mechanisms you used?
Well, full disclosure on this, and that is I didn't really. Um, I didn't really, and you will pay the price for it. You will eventually process everything that you have to process. Um, I didn't. And towards the end of my career, there are people who cared about me who said, "Hey, have you thought about going to therapy or counseling?" And I was like, I won't tell you what I said, but because but I was like, absolutely not. I can't possibly do that right now because in my mind, I couldn't unpack things or I couldn't lay bare things and then go back to work. You know, it's like, how do you open it all up and put it out there and then put a uniform back on and go back and do the same thing again? I now totally understand that there's things I could have been doing the whole time, but I just really wasn't aware of them. But, you know, like I had a shooting and it was like, they ask you, well, are you sleeping? Well, you know, you haven't slept for, you know, 10 days. And you go, hell yeah, I'm sleeping. I want to go back to work, you know? And, you know, coworkers killed and you're answering a call after you leave the hospital. And, you know, managing the hospital scene whenever you have an officer dead. And, you know, my husband being in SWAT, he's out catching the bad guy that shot and killed the officer. And I'm managing a scene at the hospital, managing the partner. It was a horrible thing. And my husband's out there and I'm like, okay, I can't deal with that. I have to deal with this. And then when my husband comes home that night and I come home that night, whoever gets home first, we're like, oh, I'm glad you're home. And that's it. And we go to bed, you know, let the dogs out, whatever. Put a load of laundry and go to bed, get up the next morning and do it over again. And yeah, how long do you do that? You know,
Right.
I mean, really, how long do you do that? Some things that I think I did naturally that I was doing even before I was a police officer is I've always worked out. I've always ran or cycled, and I always try to control what I can control, which some people would say that I'm a control freak because things I can control, I want to control them. Like my house everything has to be in its place. My kitchen cabinets have to be like organized. I mean, everything has to be in its place, but that's because I can't do anything about out in the world, but I can sure as hell, keep things in order in my home. My first marriage failed, 2 young cops, maybe that marriage could have made it if we knew how to handle the shit,
Right.
yeah. So now I came from a law enforcement family. My dad was military law enforcement. We moved every year, every 2 years or whatever. So I didn't really have close relationships in my life. And the longer I was in the police department, the more relationships I was forming. I think that was very helpful. I think that was helpful to form these relationships that I didn't come into naturally. Like some of the women who, went to the same high school and stuff, or, were in sororities and all, they might, already have that ability to form those close relationships, and they do it right away. I had to kind of learn as I was going, to kind of learn it as I was going on that. So yeah, I think the physical activity helped a lot, and stuff that revolved around my boys.
Okay. Yeah,
It's
that's good. I think those are good points as far as using your relationships at work to help stay positive, and then also obviously the fitness aspect of it, of that having a mental outlet as well. I mean, it's good for your health, but it's got the mental benefits too, which is a lot of what I promote and advocate too, of if you stay in that routine, it's going to help you to have those mental benefits as well. What advice, knowing what you know now, and everything that you've been through, I mean, what advice would you give to any officer on the street now, knowing that they may deal with those situations? I mean, what do you, I guess, wish you would have done then to better help you process some of those things?
I wish that I would have not been ashamed of my deep emotions that I had. I think when you have 2 children whose father drowned them in a mud puddle that are dead, I think you're supposed to be mad. And I think you're supposed to cry. And we shove it down inside of us. We shove it in, we shove it in. Now we've got to be completely honest about this. We can't be like a drama at work. Okay. I mean, you've got to do your job. You've got to go from call to call. You've got to take care of your shit. You got to be able to do it, But I think that I wish I would have been better when it's safe, when I'm not responsible for somebody's life, when I'm not on a 911 call, when I'm not planning the next operation. I think it would have been nice to really think about what happened and process it. Because I said earlier that you will process things. You're not going to get away with not processing things. It's going to happen. It's all in there. Like what I know now and all my coaching and training and education and stuff, we know now it is all in our brains. It is all there. It is in our bodies. It is in our brains. There's nothing that we have done that our brain does not know is there. It is there. And so I wish better at like maybe sleeping better so that things can get where they need to go in my brain so they become a memory instead of a trauma. So like I have this picture of our brains, like we have buckets in our brains. And if we're not sleeping, all the events that happen don't get put in the memory bucket. They stay in the trauma bucket. So we've got these big buckets in part of our brains where we're not supposed to have buckets. We're supposed to have like, I don't know, paper bags, maybe, just little places to hold them. And so I needed to process those. And so I am currently processing that stuff now. And it's funny when it comes up. It's really funny when it comes up. But I would tell people, be aware of that. Be aware of that. You know what? There are some people that this job is not for them. And if you reach a point where you do not believe that you could safely do your job, you need to be able to go forward and say that to the department and potentially come out of patrol or come out of the investigative unit that you're at, get some help that you need. And if you're not going to get it in that department, you need to leave. Now, that's pie in the sky, right? People have mortgages, they have their kids in college, they have car payments or whatever. But we've got to get better at recognizing when we've reached our limits. We've got to get better at that. So I would ask officers, men and women, but especially our females, to surround themselves. They always say that if you're the most interesting person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You need to be around people that are more interesting than you, that are smarter than you. Well, I'm going to add something to that. You need to be around people that aren't as fucked up as you. Can I say that on your podcast?
Yeah,
You
that's
need to take that out.
fine.
Okay.
That's real.
So,
Yeah.
you know, you need to be around people that they're not going to talk about the dead babies. They're not going to talk about the stuff. They're going to talk about other life, real life stuff that we don't have the time for. And then have the other people that you can talk about that with. And it can be a real conversation. And so you're not having to tiptoe what you say. So yeah, that sounds like you're compartmentalizing yourself later on. Well, maybe you have to do that. Maybe have the people that you can have the real life with the odd sense of humor, but also the serious conversations with, and then have the people that you have the rest of your life conversations with. Now, both groups should respect you, and you should have great respect for both groups. And I think sometimes that's where police officers have a problem, because we segment ourselves away from the people like, hey, I don't hang around with cops because I want to talk about stuff that's not cop related. Well, that's good, but sometimes you need to talk about stuff that's cop related. You can't hide the fact, you know, you're minimum of 40 hours a week of your life. You're spending more time awake at work than you are probably any place else in your life. So you need to have people you can talk about that. But on the other hand, don't lose the part of you that, you know, goes to church or plays bunco or works in a garden or is part of a cycling club or whatever. So I would say start doing that early on in your career. Don't wait until you retire to do that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I know for me, I realized early on, I used to get almost frustrated that anytime you're around cops, it's always the only thing you're talking about is like what call you had or like what horror story or funny story, or it's all about your experiences at work. And finally it gets to a point of like, how are your kids? How's the fam? Like, is there anything else that we can discuss that's not a call that we just went on? Or even being cognizant of that, like when I'm with other friends that aren't cops, like, hey, let's not talk about work. Like, let's stay present and literally talk about anything else but work because we're not at work right now. So I definitely think that's solid.
Yeah, there's value to both of that, because sometimes those conversations are processing. Sometimes it's taking it out of the trauma, put it into the memory. Or sometimes somebody just wants you to say, man, that was really awful. Because everybody's talking about how great it was. It was such a wonderful, great, exciting call. And our human side is wanting to say, that was really bad. God didn't make us be on an earth that has that happen. That is not supposed to happen. You know, the cop part of us thinks it's super cool, right? Like, oh man, that was great. We had a chance to do this, yada, yada, yada. But the human part of us needs to say, no, that's not how it's supposed to be. And if we can talk about it like that, then we can put it where it needs to go potentially.
Right. Awesome. You kind of got into advice already, but is there any other advice that comes to mind, just generically speaking, for either specifically towards women in the field right now, or maybe just towards law enforcement in general that you would give, being now that you're more on the outside looking in?
Be who you are. If you legitimately got hired, you know, you didn't lie on any of your hiring tests or anything. If you legitimately got hired, your department thinks that you were trainable and that you could be a police officer. And if you pass the academy, that means you have the ability to do it. Obviously, other things come up and people have to leave the career, but most of the people who finish the academy are able to do the job. So be true to yourself. Be true to yourself. If you're a girly girl, you can still be a girly girl. Wear your damn uniform the way you're supposed to, right? Don't add anything to it or whatever. But you know, you still have your whole life to be who you are. You can still be that person. If you're rough and tumble and people sometimes mistake you for a boy, be you, girl. Just be you. You know, do your best. Be true to yourself. There are people in the community that need you to come to their house. There are people who need to see you doing the job. There are older officers that need to see the younger officers. They have great hope that everything we have done was not in vain. You know, when I walk into an academy, or when I did walk into an academy class, or I would go into a detail and I would see 4 or 5 women, oh my gosh, that was like amazing, right? That means that that's just one detail in 1/7 of the city. And I had 5 women sitting in there. I mean, that was like amazing, right? But I just think that and women need to allow other women to be themselves. Now, having said that, pick your battles. Don't fight everything. Don't fight everything. But there's some things that you need to fight. Like if your vest doesn't fit, if your uniform doesn't fit, your department needs to provide you with a vest or a uniform that fits. I know some of these other agencies, they go to distributors and get their stuff. Keep going and demand that your uniform fit you. That uniform is a tool for you. It's not like it's just, you know, a sweatshirt. I mean, it's your tool. It's what can keep you alive. It's what can keep you safe. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but we found out in Dallas that all of us, none of our vests fit correctly. And we were all struggling with it. And we formed a committee that came together, and we got the vest, the people that were supplying our vests, the contract holder for that. He was appalled. He was absolutely appalled by this. And they changed it immediately. They immediately started getting our vests fitting better. He was ordering different vests. And it's because we spoke up. It's because we spoke up. In the past, people would say, well, your vest isn't going to fit because you have boobs, or your vest doesn't fit because you don't have boobs, or, you know, you've gained weight. Well, you know, whatever, we should still have a vest that fits us. I mean, is that bullet going to care when we're out there? So, yeah, speak up for yourself, stay true to yourself. Do some of the things like that you are helping women with now, recognizing their need for movement, physical fitness, knowing what they need to eat. The things that I'm doing to help them not fight everything, know whenever it's a fight and when it's not, when to just smile and move on, and really learn from people. I think some of the easiest lessons I ever learned is I learned them from other people by watching them. So other people who I liked how they handled themselves, I was like, wow, that was really good. I need to do that. And on the other hand, looking at somebody and going, but chance in hell I'm ever doing that. So it's both ways.
Right.
So yeah. And find something every day that you can do better at work. Every day. Find something every day that you can do better. And do not be one of those people that always moans and always groans. And this is very unfortunate, but it's true. If you are one of those women who files a complaint every couple of months, every year, it's going to be a long, miserable career for you. And it's very unfortunate, but you're probably not going to affect the change that you want to change, because people just aren't going to listen, because it's always a complaint.
Right.
That'd be my advice.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Final notes. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what you do and what your business is, and how you can help any female or anyone specifically who's listening?
Okay, so as you pointed out earlier, I took the 30 years of what I did and just all my life experiences, and realized that if I could help another woman have it a little easier, I would like to help them with that. So I am a certified life coach for high-performing women, and I picked that group of women because we tend to have fought very hard to get to where we're at, and we need to recognize when we don't need to fight. Pick your battles. That skill that you use to get the job, or to keep the job, or to get the promotion, or to be the only female on the streets, or to be the only female in some departments even, that skill does not help you in your personal relationships. That ability does not help you raise your children. It's just contentious, and it could be not get you where you want to be. So I help women just kind of get out of that survival mode while still keeping their edge. And then I also like to help people work towards retirement. My goal is to get the officers when they're younger and they start maneuvering their life how they want it. So whenever they retire, They're not that old, broken down cop who's miserable that doesn't know what to do with their time. I like to help them get a life going before they retire, find a passion or purpose or their intention before they retire. So
That's
I'm
awesome.
busy. I like it.
Yeah. So do you think it would be wise, or maybe you could help somebody who, maybe someone like me who was, I don't know, between 5 and 10 years on, having some struggles, maybe? I mean, would that be a place where they could reach out to you? And maybe more as
Mhm.
like, I mean, you could do the life coach, or maybe a more mentor role. But would that be like a good person for you to work with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so one thing is, as a certified life coach, I ask questions of the individual. So I don't talk to them for 10 minutes and tell them about my life and then see how they can make their life like my life. That isn't what we do. I am able to listen to what they're saying and then ask the next question and let them answer themselves on helping identify why they're potentially not exactly where they want to be, or they don't have the feelings that they want to have, or they're not having the movement that they want to have, or maybe they're having too much movement and it feels like life is going too fast for them. I help them identify if that's happening. I don't tell them it's happening. They have to figure that out on their own. I do take the life coach hat off and go into consulting sometimes if they say something that I know is really going to be disastrous for them and they're not able to coach themselves through that. Through my questions, they're not able to come up with something that is actually healthy for them, then I'm able to say, let's stop and let's go back, you know. But yeah, that younger officer can come up with coping abilities. They already have them in them, they just don't recognize they're there, that can make their career a lot easier. Can also make their personal life a lot easier. And, you know, and our goal isn't necessarily just to be easy, because sometimes it's the difficult times where we learn the most, we get the most satisfaction, but we are looking for flow. We're looking for a good flow, a comfortable flow. We're looking for sleep. We're looking for the appropriate appetite. We're looking for appropriate conversations with people in our lives. We're looking for the right amount of energy. You know, you're not waking up feeling like you have no hope and you just want to go back to bed, but you know you're not going to get any sleep. So, and that is younger officers, unfortunately. And if you're doing it while you're younger, there's a good possibility you're going to do it, you know, a good part of your life.
Right. Okay. Awesome. So you're definitely a great resource for any age of any female that's been in a law enforcement career, and other careers obviously, but mainly the law enforcement career. And if anyone out there has some struggles or anything that they would like Kimberly's input on, I think she's an awesome resource. That's why I wanted her to come on the podcast. So why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and how they can get a hold of you if they'd like to inquire on some of your coaching services?
Okay. The easiest way to get a hold of me is through email, because I know everybody has crazy schedules. And that is retirestrat6138@gmail.com. And yes, that's my badge number. So retirestrat6138@gmail.com. And I do also have a public Facebook page that you could message me through, and that's Bold and Brave Women. And it is a public page. People do comment on it, but you can also message me through that. And then once we have contact, I'll obviously give my cell phone number out, and we can text or talk on the phone. I talk to women frequently, even if I'm not hired as a coach, we still chat and kind of get things going in the right direction. I consider that mentoring. I had some very good mentors, and they were not all women. I had some men that were mentors. I had some people that I really learned from, and I totally, completely believe in doing that forward.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I think you're awesome. I'm a huge advocate of anybody
Thank
who
you.
needs your help to
Thank you.
go find her. Find Kimberly Stratman. She's To The Point Coach, and I will put a link, hopefully, to your website or your Facebook group when I put this out. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll have you back on here again soon.
Okay, thank you.